Hey guys, so welcome back to another video, and today would be talking about one of the basics or one of the pillars of OOP, object oriented programming, and that is inheritance. So inheritance, as I said before, is one of the pillars of Java, and inheritance makes the code much more modular, and it makes the code look much nicer and easier to use. So before diving deep into inheritance, we first need to understand what classes and objects are. If you're already done with it, and if you want, you can see my previous videos. So if you're already done with it, then you can move on to this portion of the video. So let's just get into it, and we'll be following a book which is called the Java the Complete Reference, and here you can see it's the 9th edition and the writer's name Herbert. So inheritance is, so if you think about inheritance in a very real life situation, where let's say there's a father who is X and he has a child who is Y. So a father, let's say he has his own house, he has his own car, and at some point that child would definitely inherit all of these properties from his father. And a much easier example would be, we sometimes hear people say that the kid has got the eyes of his father. So these are kind of like inheritance. So the kid inherited the genes from his father, and similarly Java also has that concept here. And in this we have, let's say we have a class called A, and we have another class called B, and A class would have a variable called a car and a variable called, let's say, a house. So any objects created under the class B, which is a subclass of A, meaning that class B is a child of class A. So same as the father and child relationship. So this is the father, and this is basically the child. So the child would definitely have access to the dad's car and his house, and the child, let's say he has his own variable called his own earned money. So if you look into the real life situations where the dad would never ask his child to give him money, so this variable is inaccessible to class A, so he cannot access this. However, class B would definitely have access to all of this. So this is the basics of inheritance. And to inherit a class, so as I said, class A is the superclass or the father, and class B is the child slash subclass. And to what are the terms that we have to introduce here? So the first term is basically class B extends class A, which means that B is a subclass of A, or B is a child of A, or B is beneath A. So B would definitely have access, as I said before, to all the variables of A. However, A wouldn't have access to the variables of B. So the dad would never have access to the money of the child. So if we look into the book, we have a few examples here, and this is how they have written. So class A and class B extends A. So I have another example which is much easier than the book, and in this example we have a class named the father, and he has, say, one car and one house, and he has $65,000 in his bank account. And the father has these methods. So he has a method called ride car, so you can ride his car and you can stay in his home, so stay at house. So as I said, the child would definitely have access to all these variables and methods of the father, as he is a subclass of his father. So if we look into the child class, we can see that child extends father, so he would definitely have access to all those variables. And this child has his own variable which is called earned money, and in his earned money he has $2,000 and he has his own method. So the father would never go to school, but the child would, so that's why he has his own method. Now if we look into the main method, we can see that like we are creating an object of the class father, so father, and his name is Henry, and we are creating a new object. Similarly, the father's child is called Holly, so child, Holly, new child. Now as I said, Holly would definitely have access to her father's car, money and house, right? So if you print it out, so system.out.print Holly.car and Holly.house and Holly.money, so this would definitely give us these outputs. So Holly's father has one car, Holly's father has one house, and Holly's father has $65,000 in his account. Now Holly has her own money, right? Holly.earned money, and this is her own variable, so this object Holly can definitely have access to that variable and its value, so she can definitely look into her amount, so $2,000. And as I said before, so any object of that class, like under the Holly class, would have access to the father's methods too. So she can have access to the ride car and stay at house, so the father definitely gives Holly the access to enjoy the car and stay at his house, right? So if you look into, like, if you call these methods, so Holly stay at house and Holly dot ride car, she can definitely have access to those methods and these print out these things. However, as I said before, that Henry the father can never have access to Holly's own variables, in this case which is earned money. So if we try to print this out, Henry.earned money, this would give us a compilation error, because object of the father class doesn't have any idea about the variables within its subclass. So Henry doesn't have any idea about Holly's earned money. Now we have some other stuff that we need to talk about, which is, one of them is private. So let's say Holly's father Henry has a special watch, like a special gold watch, which he doesn't want his child to get. So he doesn't want Holly to inherit that watch, right? However, Henry wants that his like brothers or sisters, they can inherit that watch. So he says that his brother or his wife or his sister can inherit the watch. So Holly would never know about that watch. So what does that make it? So what does that make the watch? So the watch would be a private variable. So it's a private thing of Henry, which Holly doesn't have any idea about, and Holly would never have access to that watch. So she can never have that watch. However, all the other classes that are not a subclass of the father, which do not extend from the father, would have access to that variable. So in this case, that variable would be called private. Now in the book's example, we have class A and a variable called I, and another variable which is declared as private, which is J, and this has another method, and B extends A, and B has its own variable called total. Now when we call the sum method, it tries to add I and J, but as I said, class B has no idea about about J, because j is a private variable. So this would say that j is not accessible here, and this would create an error. Now let's try to look into another situation where this is called a superclass variable can reference a subclass object. So in this example of the book, we have two objects, two classes. So box weight is one of them and another one is box. So to understand this, we just need to understand this example where we have a class called box, which has all these variables and all of these methods, and we have another class which is called box weight, which extends box. So we have box and the subclass is box weight. Now if you look into this example, so we are creating an object called plain box, and the plain box is able to hold an object of the subclass, which is the weight box. And this is completely possible because if you think about it, and we look into the father-daughter example of Henry and Holly. So Henry, being the father, he can definitely take care of Holly, right? Because she's the child and the father has all of these attributes and the properties and stuff. So he can, being the bigger person or the older person, he can definitely take care of his child. However, even though he's taking care of his child, he doesn't have any idea about Holly's earned money, right? And that completely makes sense, right? So Holly is being taken care by her father. However, her father doesn't have any idea about Holly's earned money. And if you look into like a vice versa example, so Holly can never take care of her father Henry. So let's just assume Holly is like a little child, and being a school going kid, she cannot take care of her father properly. So any object of the subclass can never be equal to any object of the superclass. However, the vice versa is completely okay. So objects of the superclass can be equal to objects of the subclass, but that doesn't mean that that object, so object superclass, would have any access to the variables or methods of the subclass, which we can see that here. So plain box dot weight, which is a weight is a separate variable under the box weight class. So if you can see that here, so class box weight extends box, and box weight has its own variable called weight. So plain box dot weight, this would never work. So the following statement is invalid because plain box doesn't have a defined weight member. So this would never work. And the example, like the lines are written here in the book, this is why plain box cannot access weights even when it refers to box weight object. If you think about it, this makes sense because the superclass has no knowledge about what a subclass adds to it. Now we need to understand one of the most important things in inheritance is the term super. So before diving deep into the super keyword, we need to understand how each class or each constructor is being called. So to understand that, we have another piece of code, which is this one. So in this code, we can see that it's the same code as before, but however, we have another constructor here. So we have a new constructor where the father constructor says that the father comes first, and in the child constructor it says then the daughter. So whenever we are creating an object under the subclass, let's say child Holly equals to new child, so in this case it would always call the superclass first then the subclass. So in this case, so when we are creating child Holly equals to new child, it would go to the superclass father, it would run its default constructor. So first comes the father, then it would run its own constructor, which is then the daughter, and which we can see right from here. So this is the output. So first comes the father, then the daughter. So always remember that the superclass goes first, the constructor of the superclass goes first, then we have the subclass. Okay, so as long as we understand this, now we can move on to the super keyword, and the super keyword is basically saying this. So whenever a subclass needs to refer to its immediate superclass, it can do by use of the keyword super. So we have two ways to use super. So as I said before, so super has two ways. So one is super can call the constructor of the parent class or the superclass, that's why it's called like a super. And another way is that super dot a variable name would give you the value of that parent class's variable. So let's just look into an example to better understand what's happening here. So this is the father class, same as before, but now we have another variable which is called the string daughter, where we would just put the name of the daughter here. Now we have changed the constructor of father. Now this constructor is changing the default constructor, so we do not have any defaults, right? So this is the only constructor that the father class has. So whenever we are creating an object of the father class, we definitely have to pass on a string variable, which is this one. So string daughter name, which would assign daughter name to daughter, the variable, and then we would print out the name of the daughter. Okay, and now if you look into the child class, which extends father, so it has a new constructor which says that it calls super.holly. So as I said before, whenever we are using super just by itself, that means that we are calling the constructor of the superclass. So in this case, as I said, so super, and we are passing the name Holly. So what does that mean? So Holly is going up to the constructor here of the father class. So the constructor of the father class is this one. So we have father and we get Holly as the parameter. So daughter would be now Holly, and it would print out that my daughter's name is Holly. So let's see what happens here. And see, it prints out that my daughter's name is Holly. Now remember I said that whenever we put super.variable, it would give us the value of that variable in the superclass. So whenever so let's just look into the subclass again. Now we have another method in the subclass which says public void my name is, which would print out my name. So Holly is printing out her name, and we are calling the variable super.daughter. So what this is doing, super is calling the parent class, which is father, dot daughter means that we are calling the variable that's under the superclass. So this is the one. So it's basically calling the daughter variable and asking for its value. That's why when we are calling holly.myname_is, it prints out my name is Holly, because it's getting the value from the parent class or father, which already assigned the name Holly here. That's why we are getting the name my name is Holly. However, in this case, let's say we don't write super, we just write the name of the object Holly.daughter. So this wouldn't work because initially the classes are created, then the objects work with it. So Holly, the object, isn't created at all. That's why it wouldn't understand what Holly is and would give us an error. So one of the final things that we need to go through is method overriding. So from the name you can understand that we are basically overriding methods. However, inheritance gives us this capability to override methods of the parent class. So if we read this line, so a method in its superclass, so then a method in the subclass is set to override the method in the superclass. When an overridden method is called from within its subclass, it would always refer to the version of that method defined by the subclass. So let's say you have two methods here. So we have class A, which has its constructor, all the variables, and has a method called show. Now B extends A, and B has its own variable and constructor. Now B is also having the same variable. However, let's say we are creating an object under the B class, and this object would definitely have access to all the methods of that A class. So this object would definitely have access to the show method. However, when we are writing the same name under our subclass, which is this one, like show, so whenever we are calling dot object dot show, it would definitely go to here first in your class and check if any methods are being called using the name show. So any methods, do they have the name show? If it doesn't, then it would go to the parent class. However, if it does, then it would look into its own class's methods. So for our case, we have show in the subclass and also in the superclass, right? So as I said, so as the object is being called and the object is under the subclass B, it would definitely call void show under its method. That's why we are printing k equals to 3. Otherwise we would have printed the values of I and j, which would have been 1 and 2. So if we look into our example that we have been building up since the first of the video, so in this case the superclass father has a method called ride car. It gives Holly the permission to ride his own car, and it prints out you can ride car. However, if we write the same method ride car under the subclass of child, so let's see. So if we write the same method under the subclass of child, so we are writing ride car and this is printing something different. Then whenever we are calling Holly.WriteCar, it would look into its subclass and check if there are any methods that are named WriteCar. If it is, it would override the parent class's method and would print only this one. So the Henry is giving permission to Holly to ride his car. However, Holly is planning not to, so she is going to take the bus today. So this is all about method overriding and in general idea of inheritance in Java. Hope you guys did understand some concepts, and if you have any questions or suggestions, feel free to comment down below. Thank you.